He saw her from half a block away, and at first he thought she was just another passerby trying to get away from the noise of the city. But the way she kept wiping her face, the way her hands trembled as she leaned against the bus stop pole, told him something was wrong. He wasn't the kind of man people usually approached for help. Most people didn't even look at him. They walked past, eyes fixed on their phones, pretending not to notice the worn jacket, the overstuffed backpack, the plastic bags tied with knots to keep his few belongings dry. But he noticed everything. It was what kept him safe. And right now, something about the woman in tears made him stop in the middle of the sidewalk instead of continuing toward the shelter where he hoped to get a hot meal that night. For a moment he hesitated. People cried in public all the time in this city. Some wanted help, some didn't. But when a passing car splashed water from the gutter, and she didn't even flinch, he knew it wasn't the usual kind of sadness that comes and goes. This was the kind that freezes you. He adjusted the backpack on his shoulder, exhaled slowly and approached her. He kept his steps soft, giving her time to notice him so she wouldn't feel startled. When she finally looked up, her red-rimmed eyes met his, and he saw the raw panic behind them. "Are you okay, ma'am?" he asked, keeping his voice calm and steady. Most people reacted to him with suspicion, sometimes fear. She didn't. She was too overwhelmed to judge him by his appearance. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. "Do you need help?" he tried again. That time she nodded. Just once. Quick, almost mechanical. He stepped closer and offered her the cleanest napkin he had folded inside his pocket. She hesitated before taking it, as if it felt strange to accept anything from him, but she took it anyway, pressed it to her face, and breathed shakily. I lost my wallet," she finally managed to say. "My phone, too. I think someone grabbed it when the bus doors opened. I didn't even notice. I don't have any cash to get home." He nodded slowly. Theft was common at this particular bus stop. He'd seen it happen a dozen times. But the way she said it, like losing those items had knocked the ground out from under her, made him think there was more. Maybe the wallet wasn't the real reason she was shaking. Maybe it was just the last straw. "Do you want me to help you get to the station?" he offered. "There's usually an officer there. Maybe they can call someone for you." She shook her head. "I don't want to go to the police, not right now." He didn't press. People had reasons, sometimes complicated ones. Instead, he reached into his backpack. He kept a small emergency stash. A few crumpled bills saved from odd jobs, coins he'd picked up over months. It wasn't much, but it was something. Enough for a bus fare, maybe two. "I can give you enough for a ride home," he said. "I know it's not much, but—" She looked almost offended for a moment, not at him, but at the situation, like she couldn't believe her life had come to relying on a stranger who clearly had so little himself. "I can't take your money," she whispered. "It's okay," he said. "It's just bus fare. You need it more than I do tonight." She stared at him, the tears gathering again, but this time they looked different, softer, almost disbelieving. "Why would you help me?" He shrugged a little. "Because you need help. That's enough." He held out the coins, and after a long pause she finally took them. Her fingers brushed his briefly, and he felt how cold her hands were. She put the coins into her pocket carefully, like she was afraid she'd lose them too. "Thank you," she said, "really. I won't forget this." He nodded, stepped back to give her space, and watched as she boarded the next bus. Before the doors closed, she gave him a look, one full of something he couldn't quite name. Gratitude, fear, confusion, maybe all three. Then she was gone. He stood there for a moment, letting the noise of the street fill the silence she left behind. Helping her had set something uneasy inside him, something like a memory trying to surface, but not quite reaching the top. He couldn't explain it. He just felt that the encounter had meant more than it should have. He pushed the thought aside and headed toward the shelter, focusing on the familiar routine. He needed a warm meal, a place to sleep, and a little luck to get through the next day. That night, however, the shelter was full. He arrived late, and by then every bed was taken. He accepted it without frustration. It happened sometimes. He found a spot behind the building where the wind didn't hit too hard, wrapped his jacket tighter around himself, and tried to rest. He expected sleep to come quickly. It usually did after long days. But instead he kept thinking about the woman at the bus stop, her shaking hands, the way she whispered, "Why would you help me?" like no one had done it in a long time. The next morning he woke early, stretched the stiffness out of his back, and headed toward the public square where he often cleaned windshields for spare change. The city was already alive with noise, people rushing to work, delivery trucks unloading goods, vendors setting up stands. He liked mornings. People were less guarded, more open to small kindnesses. He managed to earn a few coins before noon, enough for coffee and a sandwich from the corner bakery. As he ate on a bench, he noticed a woman scanning the crowd with restless eyes. For a moment he thought it might be her, the woman from last night, but it wasn't. This woman was older, dressed in a tailored coat, holding a photograph in her hand as she approached people one by one. Lost pet, he thought, or maybe someone missing. He returned to his sandwich, but after a few minutes he realized she was walking toward him. When she stopped in front of his bench, she held out the photograph. "Excuse me," she said, "have you seen this man?" He looked at the picture. For a second the world tilted. The man in the photo was him, clean-shaven, hair trimmed, wearing a shirt he hadn't seen in years, a version of himself that barely felt real anymore. He looked up slowly. "Why are you looking for him?" he asked. She studied his face, her expression shifting from polite inquiry to dawning recognition, then shock. He braced himself. People rarely reacted well when they realized who he used to be. "Oh my God," she whispered. "It is you." He felt his throat tighten. He hadn't heard someone say that with certainty in a long time. "You don't know me," he said quietly, but she shook her head. "I do, and someone else does too. Someone who's been looking for you." His pulse quickened. "Who?" The woman took a breath. "My daughter. She said a homeless man helped her last night. She said he knew her name." He froze. "I didn't—" He stopped. He had never asked the crying woman her name. He realized now she had never given it either. But if she knew his name, if she had recognized him— The older woman saw the confusion in his eyes. "She didn't tell you," she said softly, "but she knew exactly who you were." His chest tightened with a feeling he didn't understand. "Why?" he asked. "Why would she know my name?" The woman hesitated, then spoke carefully, like each word had weight. "Because she's been searching for you for years, and because you're the reason her life changed." He stared at her, trying to make sense of the truth she was revealing, a truth that felt too heavy, too connected to a past he'd done his best to bury. "Please," the woman said gently, "let me explain." He followed the older woman to a quieter corner of the square, away from the foot traffic and the noise of the vendors calling out morning promotions. She looked at him with a mix of caution and relief, as if she knew she was standing in front of someone she had imagined finding many times, but had also feared this moment. He kept his backpack close, instinctively protective of his belongings, even though nothing in her posture suggested threat. It was habit. Habits kept him grounded. "My daughter's name is Emily," she began. "She told me the man who helped her last night matched your description. She said you were gentle, calm, and that you seemed to understand her panic right away." The woman paused, hesitating before continuing. "When she described your voice, that was when I knew." He felt something shift inside him at the name. Emily. He tried to chase the memory attached to it, but it came slowly, like trying to grab smoke. There was something familiar, yet distant. The older woman watched him carefully, probably expecting recognition. When he didn't speak, she went on. "Your name is Daniel, isn't it?" His heartbeat stumbled. It wasn't the first time someone had said that name to him, but it had been years since he'd heard it spoken with certainty. Most people didn't care what his real name was. He had introduced himself differently over the years. Sometimes Dan, sometimes nothing at all. But hearing Daniel made something inside him tighten. "That used to be my name," he said quietly, "a long time ago." "It's still who you are," she said gently. "Even if life changed everything around you." He didn't respond. He didn't want to talk about the version of himself in the photograph she still held. That man felt like a stranger, a ghost. She continued, more carefully this time. "Years ago, you were a social worker apprentice at a community center on Maple Street. You worked with kids from difficult backgrounds. You helped them with schoolwork, helped them stay away from trouble. You were good at it, exceptionally good." He stared at her, stunned by the clarity with which she described a chapter of his life he had locked away. "How do you know that?" he asked. "Because my daughter was one of those kids," she replied. "You helped her more than anyone else ever did." He blinked, trying to bring back a face that fit the name. Emily, a young girl, maybe 10 or 11, sitting in a small classroom with peeling paint, her hair tied back with a blue ribbon. He remembered a child who rarely smiled, who kept her distance from the other kids, whose father often didn't show up to pick her up on time. The memory came sharper now. She used to sit in the corner drawing on scrap paper. She didn't talk much, but when she did, it was always to him. He hadn't thought of her in years. "I remember a girl," he said slowly. "Quiet. She liked to draw. That was her," the woman said, her voice softening. "You were the first person she trusted after a long time. You helped her with school. You protected her when her father got angry. You even called me once when he didn't come to pick her up. You stayed with her until I arrived. She never forgot that." He swallowed, the weight of the memory pressing against his chest. "But that was so long ago," he murmured. "And I didn't stay. I left. Everything fell apart." The woman nodded, as if she knew more than he expected. "Life fell apart for you," she said gently. "But that doesn't erase the good you did." He looked away, breathing deeply, trying to steady himself. "Why did she think I knew her name? I didn't recognize her last night." "That's because she didn't look like the little girl you knew," the woman explained. "She's grown now, 22, and when she saw you, she recognized something, your voice, your eyes, the way you spoke. She said it felt like hearing someone from her childhood, someone safe." He shook his head slightly. "But I didn't even realize—" "She didn't want to overwhelm you," the woman said. "She thought maybe you didn't recognize her, or maybe you didn't want to be recognized. But when she got home, she kept repeating your words. Because you need help. That's enough." She said that was exactly the kind of thing you used to tell her when she was younger. He felt an unexpected sting behind his eyes and blinked quickly to hide it. He didn't want pity from this woman, or anyone else. But hearing that a simple sentence, something he barely remembered saying, had stayed with someone for over a decade, shook him deeply. "She wants to see you," the woman continued. "She wanted to come with me today, but she had a shift at the hospital. She works in the pediatric wing. You inspired her, Daniel. She wanted to do for other kids what you did for her." He absorbed that silently, unsure how to react. Pride was a foreign feeling to him now, replaced mostly by survival instincts and routine. But hearing that he had contributed to someone's future, even in a small way, touched a part of him he thought was gone. "Why now?" he asked quietly. "Why look for me after so many years?" The woman's expression tightened. "Because she's been searching ever since you disappeared from the center. They said you quit suddenly. No one knew what happened to you. But Emily never believed you walked away without reason. She always thought something must have gone wrong. She kept checking shelters, asking volunteers, searching photos online. She didn't want to give up." He rubbed his hands together slowly, grounding himself. "A lot went wrong," he admitted. "More than I could handle." "You don't need to explain," she said softly. "Not now. Not to me." He appreciated that, truly. But the weight of her kindness felt heavy too. People didn't usually treat him like someone whose past mattered. "The real reason I came today," she continued, "is that Emily wanted me to give you something." She opened her bag and pulled out a small envelope. Its edges were slightly bent, as if it had been held many times, maybe in preparation for a moment like this. She extended it toward him, but he didn't reach for it right away. "What is it?" he asked. "A letter," she said. "She wrote it last night. She didn't want to wait. She wanted you to have it today." He hesitated. Letters meant emotion, commitment, expectations. He wasn't sure he was ready for any of that. But the woman waited patiently, her hand still extended, her eyes full of something warm and steady. Finally, he took the envelope, sliding it into his jacket pocket without opening it. "She'll want to see you," the woman said softly. "But she won't push you. She asked me to tell you that. She doesn't want to overwhelm you. She just wants you to know she's grateful, and that she never forgot you." He exhaled slowly, unsure what to do next. "I don't know if I'm the person she remembers," he admitted. "I'm not the same." "No one expects you to be," the woman replied. "But you're still someone important to her." They stood together for a moment in silence. The city noise felt distant now, as if the conversation had created a bubble around them. When she finally stepped back, she gave him a small, hopeful smile. "I'll tell her I found you," she said. "She'll be relieved." He nodded but said nothing. His thoughts were tangled, heavy, and too loud. The woman didn't press further. She simply touched his arm gently, a gesture of gratitude, and walked away, blending into the movement of the morning crowd. When she disappeared from sight, he sat back down on the bench and let out a breath he felt he had been holding for years. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the envelope again, staring at his name written in careful handwriting. Daniel. He wasn't sure he was ready to open it. but he also wasn't sure he could put it away. After several long minutes, he slid his finger under the flap and unfolded the letter. And as he began to read the first line, his hands trembled. The letter began simply, in handwriting that looked steady but pressured, as if every word mattered. He recognized the way she formed certain letters, the small loop she added to the lowercase y. He remembered helping her practice penmanship at the community center, tracing lines on paper with dull pencils. The familiarity hit him harder than he expected. "Daniel, I don't know if you remember me, and I don't know if this letter will reach you in a way that makes sense. I didn't want to overwhelm you yesterday, especially when I could see you were tired. But I want you to know that when I saw you, my first thought wasn't fear or shock, it was relief. I've been hoping to find you for so long." He paused, feeling a pull in his chest. He read on. "You helped me when I was a kid, in ways I'm not sure I ever understood back then. You made me feel safe when my father yelled. You told me I could choose the life I wanted instead of the one I was born into. You said I was allowed to grow up without fear." No one had ever said that to me before. I've held on to those words since I was 10. He folded the letter halfway and pressed it to his knee. His throat tightened, and he let out a slow breath before continuing. "When you suddenly stopped coming to the center, I thought maybe something bad happened to you. I asked the staff, but they didn't know. Some said you quit. Others said you had a family emergency. I didn't believe any of them. I always felt that if you could have stayed, you would have. I don't know what happened, and you don't have to tell me. I just want you to know I never blamed you." He squeezed his eyes shut. The years flashed in fragments, losing his apartment, losing his job, losing the rhythm of ordinary life after a series of events he couldn't control. He had tried to climb back, but each time he slipped further. He didn't remember the exact day he stopped feeling like Daniel. It had happened little by little. He opened the letter again. "Last night when you helped me at the bus stop, I recognized your voice. You still speak gently even when you're tired. When you said those few words, I felt like I was 10 again, sitting at the small table with the broken corner, hearing you tell me that asking for help wasn't weakness." He stared at the line for a long time. "I want to see you. I won't push. I won't try to fix anything. I just want to talk, to thank you properly. My mom said she would try to find you. I hope she did. I hope you're reading this. If you want to see me, you can meet me at the little park behind the community center on Friday at 3 p.m. I'll be there. Emily." The ending was simple. No dramatic plea. No attempt to guilt him. Just an invitation. He folded the letter carefully, smoothing the creases before putting it back into the envelope. Then he sat in silence, staring at the ground. He didn't know what he felt. Gratitude, fear, shame, something tangled and sharp pressed against him from all sides. He wasn't sure he belonged in anyone's memory anymore, especially not someone who had turned her life around, who had managed to build something steady while he drifted from one day to the next. He put the envelope into his backpack, zipped it shut, and stood. His legs felt unsteady, as if he had been sitting for hours instead of minutes. The noise of the square returned. Cars honking, vendors calling out, people laughing, phones ringing. Life moved around him, indifferent. He took a deep breath and began walking without a destination in mind. He wandered through streets he used to know well, places he had passed every day before things went wrong. The bakery where he used to grab cheap coffee, the hardware store where he once worked part-time fixing small engines, the apartment building where he used to live on the 4th floor, before the rent went up and the notice arrived. Some changes were subtle, different paint color, new store signs, but others felt like reminders of how much time had passed. Around midday, he found himself near a small bridge that crossed over a narrow river. He leaned on the railing and watched the water move slowly beneath him. The world felt heavy. The letter felt heavier. He remembered the moment everything had started to unravel, losing his father unexpectedly, the grief hitting him harder than he anticipated. He had taken time off work, fallen behind on bills, skipped shift after shift at the community center, until eventually he stopped showing up altogether. At first he told himself he'd go back when he felt better. Then he told himself he'd go back once he found a new job. Eventually, he stopped telling himself anything. He wondered if Emily's life would have turned out differently if he had stayed. Maybe she would have had more support through her teenage years. Maybe someone else had helped her too. Maybe he wasn't as important as she thought. He pushed off the railing and kept walking. The thought of meeting her on Friday gnawed at him. He didn't feel ready. He didn't know if he ever would be. But he couldn't ignore the fact that she had looked for him, that she had written that letter. that she still cared about a man who had vanished from her life without explanation. That night the shelter had a bed available. He lay on the thin mattress, staring at the ceiling mat marked with water stains. The letter was tucked safely under his pillow. He reached for it once, then stopped. He knew every sentence now. He could recite parts of it from memory. As the room settled into quiet breathing and distant murmurs, he wondered what Emily would think if she saw him like this. Would she still want to meet him? Would she feel disappointed? Maybe she deserved to remember the man who once encouraged her, not the man he had become. The next day he woke early and returned to the square, trying to keep busy. He cleaned windshields again, carried groceries for an elderly man, collected a few coins. It didn't distract him. He kept seeing her face from the bus stop, the fear, the vulnerability, and then the relief when he had helped her. He kept hearing the woman's voice telling him Emily had always believed something bad must have happened to him. In the afternoon, as he waited near a cafe, a volunteer from a local outreach program approached him with a flyer. He had seen her before. She always offered warm drinks and information about temporary housing. "Morning, Daniel," she said. "You doing okay today?" He didn't know how she remembered his name. Volunteers rotated often, but she always used it. "I'm fine," he said. "You look like something's on your mind," she noted. "If you ever want to talk, you know you can." He shook his head gently. "I'm all right. Just thinking." She didn't push. "If you need anything, I'm around." When she walked away, he realized how unusual it felt for people to know him. For years he had been invisible, an outline on a sidewalk, a figure people walked around. But now, 2 people in 2 days had spoken his name with recognition. It felt strange. It felt dangerous. It felt like something in his life was shifting, whether he was ready for it or not. By the 3rd day, he found himself standing in front of the small park behind the community center. He wasn't sure why. Friday was still 2 days away, but he wanted to see if the place had changed. The park looked almost exactly like he remembered. The benches were newer, but the old oak tree still stood in the center. The playground swings still squeaked. The community center building had a fresh coat of paint, but the windows were the same. He stared at the entrance for a long time. He saw volunteers carrying boxes inside, children running in and out. He wondered if he should go in, but he couldn't. Not yet. He walked away before anyone could notice him. That evening he returned to the shelter early. He sat on the edge of his cot and took out the letter again. He reread it slowly, letting every word settle. Emily wasn't asking for explanations. She wasn't asking for him to change. She just wanted to see him. She didn't know the full truth of his life now, but she wasn't demanding anything from him. Maybe, he thought, meeting her didn't have to be overwhelming. Maybe it didn't have to be a step back into the past. Maybe it could simply be a moment of connection, something rare in his current life. But another part of him stayed cautious. People sometimes wanted to help him in ways that came with expectations, pity, or control. He didn't want that. He didn't want to be someone's project. Still, Emily didn't seem like the type to push boundaries. She had learned to respect people's space early in life, often because she needed so much of her own. As he folded the letter again, he realized something he hadn't allowed himself to acknowledge. He wanted to see her. The idea scared him, but the desire was real. He missed being someone who mattered. He missed being someone remembered fondly. Friday still felt far away, but he sensed it would come quickly, and when it did, he had no idea what he would say. Friday arrived with a cold wind sweeping through the city, the kind that slipped under jackets and made people hurry along sidewalks. Daniel felt the chill long before he left the shelter. He sat on the edge of the cot for nearly an hour after waking, the letter in his hands, trying to decide whether he should go. He read it again, then folded it neatly and placed it back into his jacket pocket. The day felt heavier than the others, as if every moment were leading him toward a point he couldn't avoid. At noon, he left the shelter and walked slowly toward the community center. He took the long route, circling through familiar streets, delaying the moment he would have to face her. He wasn't sure what scared him more, seeing Emily again after all these years, or seeing the version of himself reflected in her eyes. He didn't want to see disappointment. He didn't want to hear pity in her voice, but he also didn't want to run away again, not after the effort she had made to find him. He reached the park 30 minutes early. Children played near the swings, their voices rising in sharp, happy bursts. A father pushed a stroller past him, humming softly. A couple walked their dog along the curved path. He blended into the background unnoticed and took a seat on the farthest bench, one half hidden behind a trimmed hedge. From his spot, he could see everything: the entrance to the community center, the path leading from the street, the benches near the oak tree. His hands rested on the bottle of water he had bought earlier. His fingers tightened each time someone approached the park entrance. He didn't want to look nervous, but he was. At exactly 3 o'clock she appeared. She walked quickly at first, then slowed as she scanned the park. Her dark hair was tied back loosely, and she wore a simple coat, the kind you bought for comfort rather than fashion. She carried a bag slung over her shoulder, and her eyes moved from bench to bench until they landed on him. The moment her gaze locked onto his, she froze. He stood slowly, unsure what the right thing to do was. She took a few hesitant steps forward, then a few more until she was standing in front of him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Up close, he saw the features he had missed the night at the bus stop. She wasn't the frightened girl he remembered. She was grown, calm, steady, but with the same eyes, the same guarded softness. "Daniel," she said quietly. He nodded. A breath escaped her, part disbelief, part relief. She gave a small, tentative smile. "I hoped you'd come." "I wasn't sure I would," he admitted. "I know," she replied, not unkindly, "but I'm glad you did." They sat down on the bench together. A few seconds passed before she spoke again. "I wasn't sure if you recognized me that night," she said. "You looked tired, and I didn't want to force anything." "I didn't recognize you," he said. "Not then. Not until your mother showed me the picture and told me who you were." She nodded. "It's okay. I didn't expect you to. I changed a lot." "That happens," he said. "I remembered you instantly," she added. "Your voice especially. I didn't realize how much I had missed it until I heard it again." He didn't know how to respond to that. Compliments didn't fit easily into his life anymore. He shifted his weight slightly, looking down at his hands. "I guess you want to know what happened to me," he said quietly. "I don't want to ask you anything you don't want to talk about," she said. "I'm just here. Whatever you want to share, I'll listen. If not, that's fine too." Her patience disarmed him. He took a breath. "I lost my dad," he said. "It happened fast. I didn't handle it well. I thought I could take some time off, get myself together. But things built up: bills, rent, work. I started falling behind, and once I fell far enough, I couldn't climb back." She listened without interrupting. "I didn't mean to disappear," he continued. "I thought I'd be back at the center in a few weeks. Then a few weeks turned into months, and then it felt like too much time had passed. I didn't know how to go back. I didn't know how to be that person again." Emily looked down at her hands. "I'm sorry you went through that." He shook his head. "Life happens. I'm not the only one." "Still," she said softly, "you didn't deserve to go through it alone." He didn't respond to that. He wasn't used to hearing compassion directed at him. After a long pause, he asked, "How have you been? Your mom told me you work at the hospital." A small smile touched her lips. "Yeah, pediatric wing. Kids with chronic conditions, long-term care. I always wanted to help kids the way you helped me. I didn't know how when I was younger, but everything clicked when I started volunteering in high school." "I'm glad," he said quietly. "You always cared more than you let people see." She gave a soft laugh. "You used to tell me that. I never forgot." He stared at the ground, not wanting her to see how deeply her words affected him. "I wanted to find you," she said. "For years. Every time I passed a shelter or volunteer center, I wondered if you were there. I didn't know what happened to you, and I didn't want to think something awful had occurred and no one had noticed." "That happens too," he said. "More often than people think." "I know," she said softly. "And that's why I wanted to find you, even if you didn't want to talk, even if you didn't want to see me. I just wanted you to know someone remembered you." He turned his head slightly, looking at her. "Your mom said you thought I helped change your life." "You did," she answered without hesitation. "You were the one stable adult in my childhood. You made me feel like I mattered. I used that feeling every time things got hard." He didn't know how to absorb that. He had spent years believing he had faded from the world without leaving anything behind. Hearing the opposite unsettled him, but in a way that warmed something frozen inside him. They sat quietly for a while, the sounds of the park filling the silence. A dog barked. A swing creaked. Children laughed in the distance. Finally, Emily said, "I want to help you now. Not because you helped me, not as a favor, just because I care. If you'll let me." He stiffened slightly. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity," she said firmly. "It's connection. It's support. The same kind you gave me when I needed it." He looked uncertain. "I'm not trying to pull you into anything big," she continued. "I'm not asking you to move in somewhere or accept anything dramatic. I just want to be part of your life again, even a small part. You don't have to go through everything alone." He stared at the path stretching in front of them. He didn't know what the right answer was. His instinct was to withdraw, to avoid becoming someone's responsibility. But something in her tone, steady, calm, unapologetically caring, made him hesitate. "What would that even look like?" he asked finally. "Whatever you're comfortable with," she said. "We could meet for coffee sometimes, or walk here in the park. I could help you get some resources. Not force you, just help you navigate things. Or we could just talk. It doesn't have to be complicated." He thought about it. It sounded simple, reasonable, non-threatening, but he was still scared. "People don't usually stay," he said. "Not when they see the reality." "I'm not people," she said softly. "And I already saw you. You're here. That's reality." He looked at her then, really looked at her. She wasn't a child anymore. She wasn't someone who needed him. She was someone who had built a life and still reached back for him anyway. "Let me start small," she said after a moment. "Just lunch. Not today. Not rushed. But soon. Just a meal together. No pressure." He considered it, and after a long time he nodded. A small nod, but certain. Her smile was warm, relieved. "Okay," she said. "Then we can plan something." He felt strangely lighter, as if the simple act of agreeing had removed a weight he didn't realize he carried. They continued talking, about small things, work, memories of the center, people they both remembered. She told him about her studies, her mother, the kids she helped at the hospital. At one point she reached into her bag. "I brought something," she said. "I don't know if you want it." She handed him a small sketchbook. He recognized it immediately. The cover was worn, the edges frayed. It was the same one she used as a child, where she drew those quiet little pictures. "I kept it," she said quietly. "I thought you should have it now." He opened it slowly. Inside were old drawings, simple pencil sketches of the community center, the playground, the small classroom table. Some pages were smudged. Some were unfinished, but each one carried a piece of the past he had forgotten he'd been part of. He ran his finger over one of the drawings, a picture of himself, sitting at the table, helping her hold a pencil properly. It was crude and childlike, but unmistakably him. "I drew that when you said I was doing well," she said. "I wanted to remember the moment." He felt his throat tighten again. He closed the sketchbook carefully and held it against his chest. "Thank you," he whispered. She smiled gently. "I thought you might need a reminder that you mattered." They sat together until the sun began to dip, casting long shadows across the park. Eventually, she stood. "I should go," she said. "But I'm really glad you came." "So am I," he replied. She hesitated, then hugged him. It was a careful hug, asking permission even as it happened. He didn't pull away. He let himself be held for a moment, feeling grounded in a way he hadn't felt in years. "I'll see you soon," she asked. He nodded. "Yeah, soon." She walked away slowly, turning to wave once before disappearing beyond the trees. He stayed on the bench long after she left, the sketchbook in his hands, the letter in his pocket, and a small, unfamiliar spark in his chest. Hope. The next morning felt different. Daniel woke earlier than usual, not because of noise or cold, but because his mind was already awake before his body caught up. For months, every day had blended into the next, with little distinction. Eat, walk, work for coins, look for shelter, repeat. But today there was something else waiting for him, the first hint of a routine that wasn't only about survival. He folded his blanket neatly, placed his few belongings back into his backpack, and stepped outside. The morning air was sharp, the sky a pale blue. He walked out of the shelter with the sketchbook tucked safely inside his jacket. Every few steps he touched it, almost to reassure himself that it hadn't been a dream. He didn't open it, but the weight of it against his chest was enough to keep him steady. Over the next few days, Daniel kept to his routine, but with a small shift. He began walking past the community center more often, not to go inside, but to observe from a distance. Some mornings he sat on the bench across the street and watched the volunteers arrive. Other times he lingered near the playground, listening to the sounds of kids laughing, a sound that used to be part of his daily life. He didn't feel ready to step inside yet, but he no longer avoided the place. That felt like progress. On Wednesday, he met with Emily for the first time after their conversation in the park. They had agreed on something simple: coffee at a small cafe near the hospital where she worked. It wasn't a fancy place, but it was clean, warm, and quiet enough that they could talk without interruptions. Daniel arrived early and stood outside for several minutes before going in. He wasn't sure how people would see him. His clothes were worn, his jacket faded, his boots scraped from years of walking. But when he walked through the door, no one stared. The staff treated him like any other customer, and he felt a small wave of relief. Emily arrived a few minutes later, smiling as she spotted him. She ordered 2 coffees and insisted on paying before he could argue. They sat at a corner table. For a moment, Daniel didn't know what to say. But she talked about her week, a patient who had finally recovered enough to go home, a new nurse who was learning the ropes, the small things that made her days meaningful. Daniel found himself listening quietly, actually enjoying the cadence of her voice. Eventually she asked about him, but not in an intrusive way. She asked about the people he met on the streets, the places he found safest to sleep, the small routines that helped him get through each day. She didn't flinch at any of it. She didn't offer pity. She listened the way someone listens when they genuinely care. At the end of the hour, she smiled. "Would you want to meet next week, too?" He nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." After that, they saw each other once or twice a week, sometimes at the cafe, sometimes at the park. Emily kept things simple, always letting him set the pace. She never pushed, never tried to take over his decisions. But she encouraged him gently, suggesting job centers he could visit, community programs that might help him find transitional housing, shelters that offered counseling. He didn't agree to anything at first, but he didn't shut her out either. One afternoon, a week later, she approached him with something new. "There's an opening at the community center," she said. "Not a big job, just part-time maintenance work, cleaning, organizing, helping with supplies." He stiffened. "I don't think It's just an option," she said quickly. "No pressure. They don't know I'm asking. I just thought, maybe you'd want to try. You know the place well." He leaned back on the bench. "I haven't worked in a real job in a long time. That doesn't mean you can't again," she said. "And they're used to helping people get back on their feet. No judgment." He didn't respond right away. The thought of stepping back into the building where he had once mentored children was overwhelming. But a part of him, a small, fragile part, was curious. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "That's all I'm asking," she replied. That night he barely slept. He imagined himself inside the center, sweeping floors, cleaning tables, hearing laughter echo down the hallways again. He wondered if he would feel like an intruder, or if he might feel like someone who belonged there. 2 days later, he walked to the community center early in the morning. He paused outside the entrance, took a deep breath, and stepped inside for the first time in over a decade. The smell hit him immediately, a mix of cleaning supplies, crayons, and warm air. It was the same in a way that made his chest tighten. A volunteer approached him. "Good morning. Can I help you?" Daniel hesitated. "I heard you might have a maintenance position open." The volunteer brightened. "We do. The coordinator can talk to you." "Just a minute." The interview wasn't formal. They asked about his experience with cleaning and odd jobs. He told them the truth. He had done everything from sweeping sidewalks to fixing broken shelves during his time living on the streets. The coordinator listened carefully, then nodded. "I think we can give you a chance," she said. "It's part-time to start, a few hours a day. We'll help with transportation too. You'll have support here." Daniel felt something unfamiliar swell in his chest. Possibility. "When can I start?" he asked. "Tomorrow," she said. When he stepped outside, Emily was waiting on the sidewalk, pretending not to look excited. "How did it go?" "They hired me," he said. Her smile lit up her entire face. "I knew they would." He exhaled slowly. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Of course you are," she said. "It's new, but you're not doing it alone." The next morning, he arrived at the center before the doors opened. He worked steadily for hours, wiping tables, organizing supplies, mopping floors. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. It was routine. It was something he could build on. Volunteers greeted him kindly. Kids waved at him. The coordinator thanked him twice during the morning. For the first time in years, he felt like part of something that mattered. As the weeks passed, Daniel's life began shifting. He moved into a transitional housing program recommended by the center. He received help getting documents replaced. He even saved some money from his paychecks. Each step felt small, but each one pushed him further from the version of himself who had disappeared years ago. Through it all, Emily stayed. Sometimes in the background, sometimes at his side, but always steady. She never treated him as fragile. She treated him as someone growing, someone rebuilding. Months later, on a quiet afternoon, they sat together on the same bench where they had met on that cold Friday. Kids played in the distance. The sun was warm. Daniel held the old sketchbook in his hands. "You know," he said, "when I helped you at the bus stop that night, I had no idea who you were." Emily smiled. "I know, but I knew who you were." He looked at her carefully. "How?" "Because some people shape your life so deeply," she said, "that you recognize them even after time changes everything else." He let her words sink in. They weren't dramatic. They weren't poetic. They were true. He nodded slowly. "I'm glad you found me." "I'm glad you let me," she replied. Daniel closed the sketchbook gently. The pages no longer felt like relics of a past life. They felt like reminders of who he still was, and for the first time in many years, he believed he could build a future, not because someone rescued him, but because someone remembered him long enough to remind him he wasn't lost.